Hi, my name is Mike Hayes, and this is The Case for Paying College Athletes, NCAA Exploitation and How the Nation Can Change It. Collegiate athletes are unique to the United States, and student athlete is a legal term that has only existed since the 1950s. In other countries, the equivalent to an NCAA football or basketball player would simply be a minor league player in a less prestigious professional sports league. Players in these leagues make low wages and are scouted and recruited by professional sports teams before being offered a contract. The term student athlete was first used to protect the University of Denver from providing workers' comp for an injured football player. By referring to the player as a student athlete instead of an employee, the University of Denver was not held accountable the way a professional sports team would be for their players' injuries. The term student athlete has since become the pillar of the NCAA's amateurism system. The NCAA's amateur policy forbids salary and prize money above actual and necessary expenses. This policy extends beyond sports, meaning that athletes are not to make any salary that would cover more than basic food costs. The man in the picture here is former Ohio State quarterback Terrell Pryor. He was punished by the NCAA for receiving free tattoos because it was considered a violation of amateurism policies. These types of income and gift restrictions are only for people on athletic scholarships. Students on academic scholarships and students who are on no scholarship whatsoever can work jobs and receive gifts and outside money if they want or need to. The premier division of football is called the Football Bowl Subdivision, or FBS, of Division I. A median FBS school's football program generates $60 million in revenue, and that is only for FBS football. That does not include basketball. The NCAA makes more than $900 million in annual revenue, and 81% of that comes from television and marketing. College sports has become a staple of the television and entertainment industries, and CBS has agreed to pay $10.8 billion to the NCAA over the next 14 years to have exclusive broadcasting rights for their March Madness college basketball tournament. The athlete whose labor actually generates these figures receives no money for their work. You now have the who and the what of an upcoming feature story for The Nation, America's oldest weekly political magazine. This feature story sets out to do more than just expose the corruption in the NCAA's amateurism policies. It will also propose multiple options for reform. It will explain the economic impact outside of sports that will result from paying collegiate athletes. It will appeal to audiences who would be concerned with the economic and political consequences at stake rather than just the sports fans. And I'll explain how the condensed 1,200-word version of the story will differ from the 2,000-word full-length format. Amateurism needs to end because it is dishonest in origin and corrupt in practice. Student athletes are employees. They are recruited by schools because of a particular skill set that the school predicts will help bring in millions of dollars in revenue. By living up to their end of that bargain, the players deserve at least a small fraction of the money that their labor generates. Coaches and athletic faculty earning six-figure salaries is hypocritical if athletes remain unpaid. The man in this picture is Alabama football coach Nick Saban. Nick Saban has a contract worth more than $7 million, making him the highest paid person in the entire state of Alabama. He is neither a professor nor an advisor at Alabama. He has no academic relationship to the school whatsoever. If he can earn money strictly for what he does for athletics, his players should be able to do the same. A salary or a stipend will incentivize the NCAA and Division I schools to investigate academic fraud more thoroughly. Kicking an academically ineligible player off of a team saves the school, the athletic conference, and the NCAA a paycheck. Lastly, and most importantly, providing low to moderate wages to this many college students will actually stimulate the economy. Providing Division I athletes with the equivalent of a $10 an hour job will stimulate the economy. This is supported by studies taking place before, during, and after the Great Recession that show that low-wage job creation helps create a strong economic floor in the communities that experience that job growth. This is true for both highly concentrated urban areas like New York and Los Angeles and less populated rural cities like Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who rely on college sports to bring in outside money. college towns will benefit greatly from the circulation of money into their local businesses and their overall community. Since the number of athletes stays rather similar year to year, the costs on schools, athletic conferences, and the NCAA will have little fluctuation year to year, making it easy to adjust annual budgets. This money will be going directly to the working class, providing young adults with a livable salary that can help them maintain a capable lifestyle after their college sports careers are finished. Less than 2% of college football or basketball players pursue professional sports. So more than 98% of these collegiate athletes will be financially stable as they pursue other career endeavors. Some of the most common arguments from those who oppose playing college athletes are that this would cost the schools and the NCAA too much money. But in fact, the equivalent to a $10 an hour job for every rostered football player on an FBS team would cost $500,000 less than the average football coach's salary. Another argument is that these athletes already receive scholarships, so why should they get a salary? As mentioned earlier, their scholarships come with more restrictions than any academic scholarship, and an education on borrowed time is not enough compensation for the labor of athletes who generates millions of dollars for each school. The overall argument that you hear from the NCAA and people who side with it is that they are students first and athletes second. But that is just not true. They are recruited exclusively as athletes, and the school anticipates that their athletic prowess will bring revenue and prestige to the school. They deserve to be paid for providing their end of that bargain. Also, paying athletes will incentivize the schools and the NCAA to be tougher on academic fraud, because very simply, if you cut an unqualified player, then that saves them that player's salary. Now that those arguments are taken care of, it's time to examine the different options for payment. First, the NCAA can lift its ban on players receiving outside finances, either by gift or salary. Lifting the restriction on players earning money for part-time jobs would ultimately mean turning a blind eye to financial gifts from schools. It also eliminates the hypocrisy between what students on academic and athletic scholarships can and cannot do. Another option is that players can negotiate their salary with the schools while they're being recruited. This is far more regulated than a laissez-faire approach to gifts and under-the-table offers, but more than anything, it's pure free market capitalism. It allows the athlete himself to examine the supply and demand that exists for his skills among the market of schools that are recruiting him. And lastly, there's the option of a fixed-rate stipend or salary for players who are academically eligible. The players would all receive an equal salary, meeting Title IX requirements, and the Power 5 athletic conferences would have no problem whatsoever affording these low salaries. It only goes to players who meet academic standards, which again incentivizes strict enforcement of academic policies. The NCAA can put one of these options into effect and get ahead of this problem now, but if they wait any longer, it could be their downfall. The first domino to fall in the direction of paying students was the court ruling in favor of former UCLA basketball star Ed O'Bannon. O'Bannon's image and likeness were used without his consent in the 2009 March Madness video game. The game made millions of dollars in sales, and neither O'Bannon nor any of the current or famous players whose likenesses were used received any royalties. While schools sell games, jerseys, posters, and other memorabilia with players' likenesses, the players themselves are forbidden from doing the same. In a recent example, University of Georgia running back Todd Gurley was suspended for selling autographed merchandise online, but the NCAA sold replicas of his own jersey for $90 at stores and online shops. The court ruled that the NCAA profiting off of players' likenesses while forbidding players from doing the same violates antitrust laws, and bringing antitrust laws into the NCAA and student-athlete discussion ultimately means discussing employee-employer relations. And if the NCAA doesn't act quickly, it could find itself on the end of a much more damaging lawsuit. This result is a clear step in the direction of paying athletes, but it is in the NCAA's best interest to get ahead of this issue and turn it into a positive while they still can. The Nation is the ideal platform for this feature story for ideological and schematic reasons. The Nation is America's oldest weekly political magazine, being the standard bearer of progressive politics since 1865. Ending amateurism in college sports would be a landmark political decision in both labor and economic policy. The economic impacts of paying collegiate athletes would turn this sports discussion into an economic and political discussion. Therefore, the story itself needs a political platform. The feature story aligns with the nation's stances on decades worth of other labor and economic issues, including the New Deal, the defining legislative act of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's presidency. There will be 2 versions of this story submitted for publication, one long-form 2,000-word piece and a shorter, more condensed 1,200-word version. Both pieces cover the topics mentioned in this presentation, but the 2,000-word piece goes into more detail regarding the economic studies related to job growth, the O'Bannon case, and where the NCAA's lofty revenue figures come from. The longer piece will also provide multiple anecdotes about specific players who received unfair or contradictory punishments from the NCAA. The 1,200-word version of the story will still mention O'Bannon versus NCAA, but only towards the end as a forecast of the changing tide in the college sports landscape. In the shorter feature story, the only athlete with an anecdote about his treatment from the NCAA will be Laremy Tunsil of Ole Miss. Tunsil has been a major discussion topic in sports media this past week due to a revelation that he asked a faculty member for money to help pay his mother's rent. Due to the timeliness of this incident, his situation will be a split anecdote that both introduces and concludes both versions of this feature story. In conclusion, the concept of the student-athlete is exploitative in origin, and it has only grown worse over time. Student-athletes are recruited because their skills can generate revenue, so they deserve at least a small piece of the $900 million in annual NCAA income. Paying Division I athletes a small stipend will stimulate the economy, and it will do so directly among the youngest members of the working class. If the nation publishes this story, it will turn the issue of NCAA exploitation into an essential topic of political discussion among media figures and decision makers alike. Thank you very much.